Hey everyone, I'm Angela Lynn.
And I'm Jesse Lynn, and welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From?
Today we're talking about babies and specifically modern baby making and all the taboos that seem to exist around ways of going about making babies. This topic is top of mind for us for different reasons. For me, I'm at an age where my biological clock is a ticking. Tick, 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 y'all. I think we've talked about it before, but being a woman sucks in like many ways, but particularly when it has to do with biological clock, because there is this feeling like if you want to ever have kids, you have to do it by a certain point in your life. And as we just said, modern baby making is the actual topic of today's episode. So that rule really only applies if you are trying to have babies the natural way and with like as little complication as possible. But modern science has obviously adapted to a point in which you have many different options for still making babies, even if you're kind of past the prime natural window. But regardless, honestly, I feel like women that are in this age range of kind of like mid to late 20s to mid 30s, you still have to think about it, even if you plan to have babies through like some sort of science aided help, unless you're going through adoption, right? Big caveat. But if you want to have your own DNA as part of the process, you still have to be thinking about this, because even if you want to have babies later through like in vitro or whatever, you need to have had frozen your eggs while you were still producing eggs that are like quite viable. So anyways, because you are kind of forced to confront this reality of just like the biology of your body around this like plus minus 5 to 8 years of your life, it's very top of mind for me because I'm in this age range now and I've been in this age range for many years now and have seen my friends like kind of work through this process and are continuing to work through this process for themselves. It's just like constantly a topic, honestly, between many of my female friends.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know my preference for babyhood, babydom, which is that it's most likely not going to happen for a couple reasons, but largely because I am that kind of person who wants to know that I can safely commit to doing something before I do it. And I just feel like with a baby, there's like no way to do that. But I think there are definitely a ton of issues faced from an LGBT perspective mixed with an Asian perspective, especially when you think about the ways that folks like me can actually have a family. You either have to go through surrogacy, which I think can be very expensive, or you have to go through adoption, which can also be very expensive depending on what kind of adoption route you take. And I think underneath that is if you go certain routes, the child may still be seen as like illegitimate, like they're not necessarily your blood family. So I think there's also this kind of question for me as to like whether having a baby, even if I could, whether this baby would feel included as part of the family.
So we are going to get into it by talking about the two big alternative science aided ways that people are making babies now, what we see as pros of like why people would be doing it, or if we have personally considered doing it or know people who are considering or have done it, and also some of the taboos that are around that and why they might exist. So first one, surrogacy. A lot of women go down this route because unfortunately, one of the things that is kind of still quite incredible to me about modern science is that there are now already so many ways that science can help you make babies, but still for some reason there's no like leading up to you getting pregnant, strong way for women to know if they have fertility issues until they were already trying. There are a few startups, you've probably heard of like Modern Fertility or like something like that, where you can do like take-home tests to use some drops of blood and like get some idea about your egg count or whatever. But honestly, when you talk to doctors, they're like, that shit's a scam. Like that doesn't tell you anything really. Like just because you know you have a certain egg count doesn't mean that the eggs would like fertilize properly when you actually start the process. The only way you know if you have fertility issues is if you have been actively trying to get pregnant for a year and have been unsuccessful. And then at that point is the first time they would be able to do anything about it, like testing both the woman and the man to see like who is responsible and like what exactly is causing the problem. So infertility issues is just like one of the biggest reasons that somebody would turn to alternative baby making options aided by science. And it's just kind of shitty because I feel like there is this taboo around surrogacy because they're like, oh, is it really your baby? Like, if somebody else is carrying it. But like, if you have infertility issues that you discover later on, one, because you couldn't have known any sooner, and then like two, whatever you might have, the problem itself, like it would not be possible to do it in some ways, you know, to be the incubator yourself. So it's this weird concept because it's like, why is there so much fault and shame laid on somebody for not being able to be their own incubator when also society hasn't helped in any way for them to even know ahead of time or do anything about preventing their own ability to carry children?
Yeah, this issue reeks of gatekeeping for me because it's like, oh, you're not a real mom if you didn't carry the baby. People think that the experience of being a mom has to include certain things. And of course, like, is being naturally pregnant with your own baby a special different experience? Yeah, I'm sure it is. But that doesn't mean that just because you didn't have that, you still can't be a good mom. So that's definitely a weird one. And I will also say with a lot of infertility issues, I feel like a lot of the blame is placed on the woman or the birthing partner, but a lot of the times it could be the guy. Like, as everyone gets older, like, you're just less fertile in general, and guys that can just manifest in like non-viable sperm or sperm that is like that has less motility. And I think we actually, like, speaking of the connection with Asianness, like, I remember watching Bling Empire, and Christine Chu and her husband were talking about their whole like having a baby situation. And I think that's the exact like thing that they went through, where she was like, my husband is kind of getting to that place where his sperm is no longer as viable, but I'm getting blamed by the parents for not being able to have a baby or having a surrogate carry the baby.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I also feel like the Asian part of it is like quite interesting because I don't know what the read is from like, you know, modern Asia, since we acknowledge that the ideas we have around Asian culture, or specifically Taiwanese Chinese culture, because that's where our family's from, is usually locked in time based on like whatever our parents currently think, which is what the people thought in Taiwan when they left in like the 80s, 90s. But that's not necessarily reflective of what people think now. Because one hint where I believe that it is changing, and maybe it's not widely accepted, I've been hearing that there is like a wave recently of like essentially wealthy mainland Chinese people who have been paying for surrogate mothers to carry their children in the US so that they can get US citizenship, the child, not necessarily the parents. I don't think that actually works for them that way. Obviously, there's like many different factors that might be playing into why they're doing that. I already mentioned citizenship, so giving their child the advantage of American citizenship is a huge thing. But if that's even something that like enough people are doing that it's being talked about as this kind of like wave of things happening, then it can't possibly be that taboo anymore in modern China, as opposed to like maybe it's on the same scale as where it is in the US, right? Like surrogacy in and of itself isn't necessarily seen as like a super like only evil people do it in the US kind of thing, but there are plenty of people who still look down on it for more like societal or like personal belief reasons. So maybe, I don't know, if you guys are from China, Taiwan, or any modern Asian society and have 2 cents to weigh in on how surrogacy is seen today, we'd love to hear that because we just don't know all that much about how people see it there.
Yeah, I actually almost look at surrogacy like the opposite way, where I don't necessarily look down on the people who are doing it in that sense, like, oh, you can't have a baby. But we know surrogacy is a very expensive thing to do. Like you're basically sponsoring a person's life for the entire period of the pregnancy. So for me, it's more like if you choose that route, is it really necessary versus adopting? Since there are so many children who could already be adopted, whether or not it's the ethical choice to make. But of course, everyone's personal family and everyone's personal decision, regardless of how I see it.
There are so many complications with this concept of surrogacy also because humans aren't robots, right? We talk about this all the time. So like even if you agree to specific terms of like the kind of relationship that you'll have with the surrogate mother, humans are weird and we have feelings that we can't explain and whatnot. And like I've definitely heard of stories of where it gets messy once the child is born because sometimes having a child, as you said, is a very special experience. And like being the one that is actually carrying that life, it's inside your body for like over 9 months. So you obviously have a connection to it. And sometimes the surrogate mother like can't let go of the child, even though they have decided before it was born, like, it's obviously your baby and like I'm just doing this to help you, but I don't know, for me, like I won't know if I need this option until I know if I have infertility issues because women don't know anything about their fertility until too late, it seems. But for me, this one personally feels messier. I totally respect people who decide to go down this route. There are many reasons why you would choose to do it. But for me, I think the lines are a little too messy in like a lot of different respects with like the people involved. That would be more like my issue.
That's fair. Well, have you gotten the other option of freezing your eggs yet?
So I haven't, but I have I think a lot of my friends actually have done it. Like if they haven't already had a kid, they have frozen their eggs. Because as I've said, like this is the time of our lives where we're like being forced to confront this issue. There's kind of like two routes of friends that I've been noticing. It's like the one group that's like, I'm freezing my eggs because I want the option to have kids, but I don't know when I'm gonna have kids. So like I don't want to regret not having viable eggs later, but like careers first, like family comes later, great. But like at least I have this backup thing. And then I have the other group that's like, I would like to have kids naturally, but I'm gonna do the egg freezing as a backup in case because we won't know if I have fertility issues until later, once we've already been naturally trying for like a year. So having eggs as a backup is a good idea. I have personally not chosen to do this for many reasons. One is that when I was working at big tech, where everyone gets that benefit in big tech, it feels like, where they will pay for you to freeze your eggs. And it is a very expensive process. It can cost like over $10,000. So when I was working at a big tech company, I knew that that was an option. I had friends that were a little older than me that were going through that option. I personally didn't want to do it yet because I was at a point where I was like, I'm not that old yet. I know I need to think about this, but I'm not at a point where I even want to bank the eggs because I'm still so far removed from the idea of babies that like it's not even worth discussing. However, now I don't work for big tech. So one, it's very expensive. And two, I have so many friends who've done it and it is not a fun process. I guess if you've never thought about it before, you've never looked into it before, you might think like, oh, it's easy. You just like go in, they like extract some eggs and like you're done. You have them, right? But no, because a lot of times the people that are going in to get their eggs frozen are people that aren't exactly like prime age anymore, right? Like maybe you're in your, God forbid, early 30s, right? You're already not necessarily like carrying the best eggs. So a lot of people have to pump themselves with hormones for like weeks on end, like literally stabbing yourself with a needle, injecting hormones into your leg or whatever for like weeks and weeks. And that does not come with no consequences, right? Having hormonal changes all the time will make you feel pretty whack for a long time, pretty shitty. And that's all in hopes of like making your internal situation more friendly to cultivating many and viable eggs. And then they extract it and then they freeze it. nobody I know who has done it has been like, it was easy. And it like, I had no issues with it. They were all like, it sucked. So like, I have no desire really to do it because it's not paid for and it sounds terrible. So no. Hey listeners, wondering how you can support us? The biggest way is by increasing our visibility by following us on Instagram at Where Are You From Pod, on TikTok at But Where Are You Really From, subscribing to our YouTube channel under But Where Are You Really From Podcast, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, and telling your friends. The more people we can get to listen to the show, the more we can continue spotlighting different perspectives and stories. And if you feel so inclined, we're also accepting donations at buymeacoffee.com/whereareyouFrom. Thanks y'all. I just feel like there are so many taboos in the entire process of baby making and giving birth to child, whether that be natural or through science-aided means. And I don't know why that is, because it's like, no matter which route, I can guarantee you it's not easy, and it's not without some like emotional turmoil or physical turmoil that one or both parties of the couple is going through. I hate that there's this concept of just kind of like, oh, be like quiet about it. Like everyone knows that this stuff is hard, but like don't talk about it openly, and like just be pregnant, be happy with it, pop it out, and like never tell anyone you suffered for however long for whatever reasons.
Yeah, I feel like there's this constant back and forth between your independence and being seen as like someone who can do it by yourself and like finding help in your community. I feel like that's like fluctuated a little bit as to like what is acceptable. But I do feel like sometimes there's still this singular parent kind of expectation that you need to be able to do it all. Like you need to be able to be all the things that is mother. And I think that it's really weird because I think a lot of people have gone through it, and it's odd to kind of come out at the end of your journey through motherhood and then gatekeep or accuse other people of not being able to do the same thing, even though you know you just went through how difficult it was.
Yeah, there's also a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing about mothers who decide to either keep their job after they've given birth or to quit the job and like be a stay-at-home mom. I feel like the moms that go back to work often get shamed because they're like, oh, so you're paying for daycare, or you're paying for a nanny, or you're paying for like whatever help it may be to help your child. Like you can just do it for yourself. Like what kind of mother are you? I feel like there's a lot of shame thrown at them when they do look for help, when it's like just a math issue. Like look at the fucking number of hours in a day. Like if they did keep their job because they want to, or because like they can't financially afford to not keep their job, how many hours are even left for them to be with child, right? Like most mothers who have just given birth would prefer to be the one caring for their child if that's possible, but it's also just not necessarily possible from a time perspective, or like your energy, your mindset, your like physical strength after all that. And then the women who don't go back to work, I feel like society is in a really weird place where like feminism is in a really icky spot where it's like, oh, women can do anything, but also if you don't do everything, then you're not a feminist. Oh, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're not a real feminist, because feminists should like keep their jobs, be independent, like do all this shit for themselves, have it all, kind of as you were saying before. And being a stay-at-home mom is fucking hard. Like, I don't know why people look down on stay-at-home moms. There's a reason why people who are nannies and run daycares can make you pay so much money for them to care for your child, because it's a full-time job to care for a child, especially if you're not trying to be a negligent parent. If you're trying to genuinely put a lot of love and care and like development into raising your child, it's a fucking full-time job. Here's my rant going in like so many different directions, but it's like, it's also really frustrating to me that like none of that shame and looking down on ever is directed at the dad. Like it's always on the mom, of like, you're either guilted for going back to work and paying for help, or you're guilted for not being a feminist and like staying at home to raise the child instead of keeping a job as well. Just feels like a lose-lose in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were both working. There was a period where my mom, I think, was stay at home for a while, but the reality is we needed both the incomes. It's like you don't really have a choice. So it sucks to think that people are looking down on that when people don't have a choice from a financial perspective.
This is my last tangent, but this is also a like rant I go on with some of my teacher friends. I talk about like education a lot with them. And similarly, raising children in whatever capacity, whether you're the mom, the dad, whatever, like actually the family, or like educators that are filling up kids' heads with knowledge and whatever. Raising kids is like one of the most important jobs in the world because you're literally pumping out the next generation of global citizens, an everyday person, or it could be the next politician who's like running governments and whatever. Wouldn't we rather have good humans that are like emotionally developed, that like can communicate properly, that like understand empathy and how to interact with people properly because the parents spent significant time cultivating like a positive growing up environment for them, as opposed to like all the trauma we have that we need fucking therapists all the time to work through all of the things that are wrong with us because we have certain parts that were not cultivated properly for one reason or another. It just is like really, really crazy to me how easily society sweeps under the rug the importance of raising kids properly, whether that be from the family side or educator side, considering that it literally determines everyone's future.
Well, listeners, I think you've heard us be very passionate and vocal about this subject. We would love to hear more from you in our social media or the comments below. For parents and people trying to have kids, what are some things that people have tried to make you feel less than for or ashamed of? We would love to know so we can kind of share and commiserate and build each other up in the comments below.
And come back next week because we will have another fresh episode for you then. And until then, 再见, bitches.